Sometimes when we begin to question our faith or have doubts about our tradition, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert. When we take a step back and honestly evaluate organized religion in the 21st century, many times it doesn't make any sense. The more we cling to it and try to save it, the worse it becomes. In addition, widespread abuse, cover-ups, and victim shaming cause some of us to question whether it will ever be right again.
The Desert Sanctuary was created by Carl and Laura Forehand. It consists of a podcast, a blog, along with Carl and Laura's writing.
We're happy you're here. Welcome to the show. Good morning. Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary. I'm Laura Forehand. I am here with Carl Forehand. Would you like to say hi?
Hi.
Okay. Otherwise, I'm just going to go right into it because I want to get started on today's interview because I'm really excited to learn more about what Stefanie has to share with us. So we are going to be speaking today with Stefanie Caponi, and she is a Colorado-based astrologer, tarot reader, illustrator, and best-selling author of Guided Tarot for Teens, and the newly released Guided Tarot box set, which includes a copy of Guided Tarot and a 78-card Rider Waite Smith tarot deck. That sounds intriguing. Her work is centered around exploring shadow work, healing, and creativity using tarot and astrology as a vehicle to access the hidden realms of the self. She has been reading tarot for more than 20 years and established her business as a professional tarot reader after creating her first tarot deck, the Moon Void Tarot. She began studying astrology in 2017 after her first professional birth chart reading and has been reading astrology professionally and wrote the monthly horoscopes for Dame, which focus on intimacy and relationships from 2019 to 2022. In addition to her work with tarot and astrology, she also illustrated the young adults fiction series, All Our Hidden Gifts, The Gifts That Bind Us, and Every Gift, A Curse by Carolyn O'Donoghue. Stefanie is a frequent astrology expert in the media and has contributed her astro insight to Well+Good, the Everygirl, Refinery29 Elite Daily, as well as guested on several podcasts. Stefanie is currently represented by the Jane Rotrosen. You're going to have to help me here, Stefanie.
Rotrosen.
Thank you. Rotrosen Agency. In spring of 2022, the Moon Void Tarot first edition was released in French and is available worldwide. This beautiful collectible box set features the beloved original black and white with pops of red deck with a fully translated French language guidebook. Stefanie will be releasing her first astrology book in 2023, the Guided Astrology Workbook, a comprehensive guide to reading your birth chart, complete with exercises and reflection questions to help you unlock the gifts of your own unique astrology chart and understand yourself on a deeper level. Welcome to the podcast, Stefanie. I'm loving this bio. It's just packed full of amazing accomplishments.
Thank you.
So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
For so long, we were in a kind of a closed system. We were in more of a high control religion. I was a pastor for 20 years, and we went through a deconstruction. So it's a common phrase nowadays. A lot of people are using it. Sometimes they mean different things. But we have been deconstructing our beliefs, but also our religion. And now it feels like the world has opened up to us. Not only we did some healing, and did some trauma work and things like that, but but now, so we're talking about trauma in January, but in February, the month you're going to have a baby, hopefully. We're going to be we want to talk to people in kind of a series about things don't understand that well or something like that.
But want to know more
But
about.
want to know more
Well,
about.
want to really understand.
Just reminded me of Zoolander and his school for kids that don't read so well and want to do like way too long of a title.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think it's just like we've for so long. When you're in religion, you are not encouraged to look at anything outside of religion. So, this is our opportunity to actually like educate ourselves on and learn more about things that from reading the bio, I'm like, what you do really taps into the inner self. And that's huge, right? That's huge. That's something we all need to, I think, learn a little bit more about.
It's definitely a part of our journey. We want to get into those questions and really dig down. But before we start, Stefanie, will you tell us your story and whatever, level of detail you want to, if you feel comfortable doing that. Our job is to listen and believe you. So have at it. And thanks for being here.
Yes, absolutely. So I didn't come from a really strict religious background, but I did go to Catholic school almost my entire life. And so from a very young age, I remember going to a Baptist preschool and loving it. It was so much fun. I mean, I still know all of those songs that we sang. And then going immediately into Catholic school in kindergarten and just having that background and thinking it was so much fun. Because when you're a child, you don't see or understand the programming. Mm-hmm. It feels really inclusive. And you're like, wow, I'm so loved. I'm so supported. Like there's this whole special thing happening. And then as I hit puberty, and I started to, understand really what was happening. And I was like, oh, this doesn't really make any sense. But there's no one you can really talk to about it. Mm-hmm. I was like, I don't necessarily think I need this thing telling me about morality. Mm-hmm. I remember being very small and reading about the 10 Commandments and thinking, that makes perfect sense, obviously. Mm-hmm. Like it seemed very natural. But then, you get older and it feels like God is this thing outside of yourself. And it was like an even more strict parent than the strict parents I already had. Mm-hmm. And so when I was about 13, I went through my confirmation, which is like in Catholicism, you get to become an adult in the church. And I said to my parents, now I'm an adult in the church and I've decided I no longer would like to attend church. And they were horrified.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, about a year later is when I discovered tarot. And just, I thought it was really cool and interesting. And I didn't know what I was doing at all with it, but it was really fun and witchy. And I was super into that. And I remember being 14 and reading my first book on witchcraft. And one of the core things that they emphasized was, it's called like the rule of 3 times 3. It's like, you wouldn't do anything. You would never cast a spell or do anything to somebody else that you wouldn't want to come back at you 3 times. And I was like, again, that makes perfect sense. Right. And it all seemed very like the correlation between witchcraft and the rituals of the church seemed very similar. I remember being an altar girl when I was like 8 or 9 years old and, swinging the incense down the aisle and like thinking this was really cool. And then reading the witchcraft book and they're like, we use incense as like a smoke cleanse to clear energy. And I was like, this is the same thing.
Right.
And, like working with candles and your intentions in witchcraft. And I was like, how was that any different than going to church and going and saying a prayer and lighting a candle for somebody? I was like, this is all the same thing. Like, why is one so bad and this one's so good? But I feel bad about myself in this, and I feel good about myself in this. So
yeah,
it was kind of that. But I didn't really get so involved with my spirituality and tarot until my early 30s when I got divorced and everybody turned on me. Friends and my parents wouldn't speak to me and nobody understood. And, you know, I felt this like call, like internal call to go to my tarot deck and start like just pulling cards, like, well, and journaling about like what's happening. Why did this happen? Why am I such a bad person? And I got so involved with my tarot practice, and I kind of stumbled onto using it for shadow work and for healing. And it was really the most supportive partner to me during that time. And that's also when I started drawing my own deck, the Moon Void Tarot. So it started out just as a project, like a cathartic project where, you know, there's always imagery of a lot of different people in tarot decks, but I just drew myself going through the experience of starting over. And people really like were supportive and started responding to me. And then they, you know, I was starting to get asked, are you going to make this a deck? And I was like, who's going to want a deck that's like an autobiography? Like, I know your readers can't see it, but literally the character looks just like me.
It does. Yeah.
That's cool.
And like, who's going to want to just see a whole deck of like me? And then I had to kind of get over that because people were like, hey, I can help you lay this out in design, and I can hook you up with a printer, and we can like, this could really happen. And there were too many things like the universe was kind of pushing me to do it.
Right.
And to also start reading for people. And it just became my whole business in my life.
That's
and then,
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then my parents, now that were afraid of this and not supportive, my dad is now like my biggest supporter. He's like, make me a t-shirt. I need a Moon Void Tarot t-shirt. I want to brag about you. I got to tell everybody my daughter's like a tarot person. So it's like, it's crazy how when you start to give yourself permission to be this big departure from how you were raised, and when you accept yourself and you embrace it, then everybody else kind of accepts you and embraces you too.
So do you think that's what helped your parents kind of shift? Because you said that, you know, at one point, you know, with the divorce and everything, you know, people were kind of leaving and not speaking to you. Do you think when they saw this kind of transformation, or was there some sort of energy that you were giving off that was very attractive and brought those people back in? I'm curious about that.
That's a great question. So I think it's kind of a twofold thing. I think that is all part of it. But I think I felt so much shame and guilt around the divorce that I was projecting that out, and that's what I was receiving.
Got it.
Yeah.
When I started to shift and not feel guilty anymore, and knowing that, you know, we're both so much better off. And that took a long time to kind of work through that shame. But as soon as I forgave myself and embraced my new life, I noticed that other people started embracing me too, and kind of came back together with my parents.
There's a huge message in that. What you just said, you know, when you let go of the shame or work through your shame, and, you know, you start then giving off this positive self-acceptance energy, you know, it really draws people in. That's beautiful, really.
Yeah.
And it was kind of crazy. In 2020, you know, I'd been working all of 2018, 2019 to build the business and market myself and learn all these things that I had never, I was a hairdresser for 10 years. So I was not into technology and the internet and running a business. And I worked so hard to build. And I was so looking forward to 2020 because I was like, I have all these classes I'm teaching and I have wholesale accounts and all of these like great opportunities. And then when the pandemic hit, I lost all of my income in like one fell swoop.
Yeah.
I freaked out because I was living in New York City. And you know how like you're spending thousands of dollars per month to live in a shoebox. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. And I cried for 2 weeks and, had a pity party about it. And then all of a sudden I was like, if somebody came to have a tarot reading with me and they told me that that their income all went away after they worked so hard, I'm like, what would I tell them? And I started laughing. I was like, oh my gosh, I would tell them that the universe or the divine, God, however you want to refer to it, has leveled everything that you didn't need to create space for something new. And I was like, oh man, what is it going to be? I'm so excited. And it literally was like maybe a week or two later when I got an email from Penguin Random House asking me to be the author of a tarot book they were putting together.
Wow.
Which is now like, it's printed in multiple countries. It's, a bestseller, and it's really a practical guide that takes the scary, witchy vibes out of it. And it's like, here's how to use tarot to like live a better life. It's not religious. It's more spiritual, and it's really about learning how to just strengthen your own intuition. So you're not looking outside of yourself for things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so much of what you just said ties together for me. You talked about shadow work, and you talked about going inside, and you just said not looking outside of yourself, but going inside. For me, religion very much taught me not to trust myself. And that, I was bad, to the core, and I couldn't trust myself, couldn't trust my emotions. Is a lot of what tarot and your practices teach, or, is the way you practice, how much and why, do we need to go inside? Help flesh that out a little bit for me, because I know what I think, but I want to know what you think.
I think we're on the same page. I think it's so important. I think it's not just religion that takes us away from ourselves. I think it's capitalism, it's politics, it's all of these societal structures that tell us to ignore our instincts. And I think there are so many ways and modalities to kind of come back home to yourself. And I've just found that tarot was a great way, because, if you think about like in psychology, when they would do Rorschach tests and you would look at, the ink blots and what does that say to you? It's the same thing. You look at the imagery, and yes, you can read a guidebook that'll tell you what those cards mean. But the way I try to teach tarot is look at the imagery and first see what comes up to you. What does it mean to you? It can have absolutely nothing to do with a guidebook. If you look at an image and you're like, that reminds me of my mother, then that is what's coming up for you. And that's what you need to explore.
I like that concept. We have oracle cards. And so, but we a lot of times like use the guidebook. And it makes sense, and a lot of times it's really interesting how it kind of corresponds with something we've either dealt with in the past, maybe something we're trying to reconcile right now, etc. But now I like that, where just look at the card and what comes up for you. I feel like, again, because I think you like a person like me, I'll just speak for myself, who for such a long time looked at everything on the outside to tell me who I was or what I believed, right? So looking at those cards, I can see myself like getting caught up in believing what the manual says or what the book says that comes along with those cards, instead of just taking a minute, like you said, and what's coming up for me? Where am I feeling that in my body? And again, that just helps you get more in tune with, your own spirituality, your inner self. That's, wow. Mind explode.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I really like that idea.
Yeah, I mean, they're in a traditional tarot deck, they're very colorful. And there's lots of different people and scenes happening. And I noticed the more that I started to read tarot and got away from, the first thing that came to my mind was like, okay, what does the guidebook say about this? Or like, what do I know about this card's meaning? And I would start to see like, oh, if there's a person on the deck on this card, which direction are they focusing on? Are they looking at this card here? Let's say, for example, you were doing 3 cards, past, present, future, and the middle card is looking at the past instead of at the future. Then I would be like, oh my gosh, of course I'm not going to get to this thing that I want to happen because I'm stuck focusing this way. So like, there's so many different ways to read the cards that are not scary. I don't think there's any bad cards. That they're like playing cards. There's different suits and they all represent an element. So if you're getting a lot of cards with swords on them and that freaks you out, just remembering swords represent air, and air is the mind. So I'm really stuck in my mind. So how can I counteract that? Maybe I need to get out in nature and get into my body and process or journal out my feelings. Like there's I think it's such a practical, useful tool, especially with, therapy is still pretty inaccessible to people. And I feel like it's a really safe way to do that work by yourself.
I will say
don't go to therapy.
No. You're right. I mean,
if you need some extra support and it doesn't feel accessible to you, it's a really easy, beautiful way to just start with that work.
And I will say that when we do sit down and we kind of, for lack of better, I don't want to use the wrong language here, but like do a reading or, just turn over some cards for ourselves. There's this calm and this peace and that comes over me. And so, that's a good thing. that's actually a good thing. And these 3 years, like you said, of the pandemic and all the stresses and trauma that we've been experiencing, what a gift to give yourself to just sit down and take a moment to just, see what these cards, what message they have for you, or what is your inner wisdom telling you. So, yeah, I love them.
So that's what I really use it for.
Do you feel like, so let's just say there's a guy named Rob Bell. You may have heard of him. He's a former Christian pastor.
Okay.
He's a surfer. He's a free thinker. He's kind of, in some ways, he kind of leads maybe a more progressive kind of Christianity and doesn't have a church anymore, but he writes books and so on. And a lot of the things he thinks about like resonate with me. And one of the things he said about the universe, he said, the universe is rigged in your favor. And he says that when I kind of took that into meditation and so on, and when I thought about it a long time, what I see in nature is that even at the subatomic level, and when you look at molecules and all those things, everything seems to be about reproducing itself, making itself better. You could say that's evolving, that, the energy is going in the right direction and so on. Does that make sense to you? Is that like what you talk about? Is that what you explain that a little better? Because then the natural pushback to that is, but I had a stroke earlier this year.
Well, last year.
A year ago. Why did that happen at the universe's end? You know what I mean? That's my, the things we struggle with and so on.
That's a great question. I think, and this is where astrology has helped me a lot to reconcile that. When you look at your chart, you can really see your trauma from your childhood, from your past lives. And it's, I see it as a blueprint for the work. I look at everybody as they've incarnated into their particular body in this lifetime to go through certain events to overcome them. And your soul kind of makes an agreement. You're like, I'm going to, at this age and that age, I'm going to deal with some heavy stuff. And I'm not, I'm the goal and the point is not to let it push you down, but to overcome it. And also to make peace with the cycles of life where as we age, our bodies are changing and it's never going to be what it was. So being able to kind of let go and forgive and say, okay, my body was this way, or my lifestyle was this way at one point, and that was just a moment in time. And, like the universe, God, source, divine would never give you something you couldn't handle and that you couldn't overcome. I think about those biblical stories, and I always think of like Paul and how he was Saul, and then he became Paul because he was a shining example of overcoming like all of this stuff. And I think everybody has that in life where, maybe we think we're not good people or we've gone through some horrific pain, but it's like, okay, what is that teaching us? If you're like a bow and arrow, you can be stretched to the max, but imagine how far you could go, but you have to let go of it looking like it used to.
Yeah. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. Being present. And so there's that word acceptance, and I know the Toltec, whatever that is, the Toltec way of thinking is that we need that acceptance. And so many times people like us think, well, if I accept it, then that's some kind of compromise. I don't want to make, it's some kind of, I'm giving up or something like that. I'm just accepting it. But what we're coming to find out is that acceptance is almost like a first step. This is what it is, right? And sometimes we can't explain it all away, or we can't, but it is what it is. It's reality
in this moment.
In this moment, and I have to deal with it, right? And it seems like my life's a lot better off when I do that. I'm curious about. So, what are you doing when you do tarot? It's help us because of course a lot of our traditions want us to be afraid of anything like that,
right?
Because it's not what they do, and so it must be horrible. And I personally don't believe in the devil anymore, or Satan, but so let's just say I want to explore this. What is it? I mean, help us, from a beginning, because things we don't understand that well is what we're doing, and we don't understand it that well. Help us understand.
So I turn to tarot when I feel, I think the word lost or unsure. And I know that the answer is not outside of me, but I'm just not sure. I'm looking for clarity and some guidance. So I pull cards for myself when I need that. And I think that my clients come to me sometimes when they're in crisis, but typically when they're faced with immense uncertainty and they're confused and they're like, I want to make a big life change and I'm terrified because I don't know what's on the other side of it. And so tarot kind of helps read that energy of just what's happening around you. What do you really feel? Are you scared? Is that anxiety a fear? Like, is there actual danger? if you do this, or is it just misplaced excitement?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I work with tarot to help navigate the unknown, using your intuition as your beacon of light through it, and trusting yourself and knowing that you can't make a wrong decision. If you make a decision and you don't like the outcome, you make a new decision. It's kind of like, these are just steps on the journey.
Yeah.
But be willing to do it, be willing to change, be willing to grow. The universe is very supportive.
And you are making decisions anyhow, even if it's the decision not to do anything, right?
That is a decision.
Right.
You look at that too. What would happen if you stayed exactly where you are?
Right. Exactly. So you mentioned witchcraft. Why should we not be afraid of witchcraft? What's going on there? Or is it, it's people putting hexes on other people, or what is it? Tell it.
I don't know anyone that do that.
I feel like a lot of Christian prayers could be, reworded out like they're hexes too. I mean, how many times do we pray that somebody won't get something or will get something that they deserve? Anyway, I could go on and on. I will not, because that's kind of a tangent. But I feel like, when you were talking about how, tarot, witchcraft, there were a lot of things that were similar with religious traditions or the things we do inside the church. I'm like, yeah, and prayer is one of them. I mean, how many times do we pray, we're mad at somebody and we, pray that, they won't get something or will get something that they deserve. I'm like, that's a hex.
Yeah.
I'm just like, anyway, sorry. I went off on a tangent, but it just kind of, I think if we took a step back and looked, like you just said at the beginning of the podcast, we would see actually how much these two entities are similar rather than different.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, like the witches have a wheel of the year where they have Sabbats that they celebrate that are all connected to Christian holidays, and they're all the same thing, basically.
Yep.
Casting a spell is a prayer. It's using your intention with energy of crystals and whatever. And when they build, like witches build altars and they call in, the help of deities, you're calling on the goddesses. How is that different than like praying to St. Anthony so you can find something?
Yep.
Like working with the saints, working with the angels, working with the goddesses. It's, and I wonder if people are just really salty about working with gods and goddesses because the whole purpose of Christianity was to overcome the oppression that they were feeling from these, Roman deities, really harsh, like that. Like, I think it's so long ago. It was a different time. They developed, Christianity came about, I feel, just one person's opinion, to help make sense and feel safe and feel a sense of community. And a lot of people were like, it's not cool to feed people to lions. It's not cool to live this lifestyle. We want to have this type of lifestyle. So they were very oppressed. And it's interesting how it's evolved over the years and become the oppressor.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, and this is a real question that kind of came to me, and if I mean no disrespect by it, but how do we get away from the idea that tarot is similar to fortune telling, or if I go to a tarot reading, they're going to tell me what's going to happen in my future? How do we get away from that? Because I'm not sensing there anything similar to each other.
Definitely not. And it's interesting. I mean, I fortunately don't attract these types of clients that want to know their future. Obviously, again, it's a lot of people are consulting tarot for uncertain times, but I try to rein it back in to we all have free will. You can't fully know the future. You can just predict what's happening, read your own current energy and like, what are your next like logical steps right now that you can take in faith that you are guided on your path. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people like to go that divinity or divining route of future prediction. And it's going to take a long time to untangle that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pull a card and tell you like in 2 years, you're going to be making more money than you ever thought possible. But it is possible, but you have to change your thinking now. It's like, these are the steps. If you want that, you can plant a seed, but I think it's really irresponsible to be a fortune teller in that way and tell people these things that maybe you do have a psychic impression when you're in somebody's energy, but you don't know that that's actually going to happen. Like when I do readings for people, I book tarot and astrology, and I say tarot is reading your energy. It's going to help you feel safe and secure, but I cannot give you any timing information unless we're looking at your planets, like what's transiting around you. For example, when I started studying astrology, I was so confused. I was with my ex-husband for 14 years, and we had an awesome, we had such a chill, nice, lovely, we didn't argue. We had a nice house. We had, good jobs. And then all of a sudden, like lightning, my whole life changed. The whole thing fell apart. And it was just like, it all crumbled down. And I was like, why did this happen? And when I looked at my astrology, I started to see like where the planets were going into like my house of marriage and into my career, like blasting through. And then I started studying and going back to all these like peak times of trauma and studying where the planets were. And I was like, why does nobody take this seriously? It makes so much sense. And then I started looking ahead and being like, oh, if I'm going to launch a course or a Kickstarter campaign or something with like I started using it for like work and stuff. And the planets are here in like a money house. I wonder what it would be to do something there or like looking at relationships, like here's a good time to start dating and putting yourself out there. So like I leave the timing stuff to astrology and I'm very clear with tarot's not fortune telling.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of that may come from our religious backgrounds where the prophets were saying, this is what is, turn, stop doing what you're doing. And then people just longed for, okay, well, tell us what's going to happen.
Right.
Instead of telling us what is, we don't like to face what is, because that means I might have to change or I might not like what it is.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and again, you think I'll close with this kind of comment on this particular part. But if you think about that, if you're looking at it as fortune telling, if that's what you're going into tarot in that mindset, you're still thinking about, I need something on the outside to tell me what to do.
Yes. And a lot of times the type of person that wants that is somebody that knows at their core that whatever it is they're after is a no. And they want validation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
Something to say, no, your instincts are wrong. This person is totally your soulmate, even though they treat you like garbage and never call you back and use you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the lesson from our reality is that for many, many years, that was organized religion, and organized religion was an organization. So it always came first. And what it always tended to tell us was what was best for the organization, not what was best for us and what was, true for us and so on. So there's all those mixed messages and all those things. It's interesting that we're talking to you about, and you're talking about going inside and shadow work and so on. And we just got finished talking to a Benedictine sister, a Catholic sister who does shadow work and uses similar language to what you're talking. She's one of the genuine articles. She's a good, has been a help in my life, and so on. Not from a religious standpoint, but from that. I think that truth that a lot of different modalities, as you say, are discovering. That when we go inside, when we face trauma, when we are authentic and real and lean into stuff, then that's when we begin to find answers and direction and healing and so on. What are the books? So let's maybe kind of go through the books and helps and things that you have and are developing. Can you kind of reiterate what Laura read? Part of that will go. Can you tell us about those, why they'd be helpful?
Absolutely. So my first book is called Guided Tarot. And it's really a book that, yes, it goes through and gives in-depth meanings of the cards and how to use them in specific situations like relationships, finances, interpersonal, and work with yourself. And it goes into kind of the deeper meanings of like the numerology, the numbers all mean something. But really, a huge chunk of the book is teaching you just how to use it and use tarot to develop your intuition alongside as you're learning. It's like learning any subject. It's going to take a little while. And the longer you do it and the more you engage with it, the more it clicks. But you don't have to be afraid to approach it. So it gives like tons of, spreads, helpful questions to ask. So you're not just, pulling a card and being like, I wasn't thinking about anything and I don't know what this means or pertains to. It's like, here's like questions that you can ask. And it starts with just pulling one card a day and then works up to like 10 cards, you're doing like a whole big, it's called a Celtic cross. I don't use it. It's very antiquated to me. I think that you can do, 3 cards, and I always write the questions down so I don't forget them. And just teaching people like how to get comfortable. If it's okay, I would love to have my publisher send you one of the books with the box set so you can have the deck of tarot cards and the book. But I wanted to make sure that we enjoyed the conversation and you felt comfortable, and I don't like to push it on anybody, but if you want to play with it, I'll definitely have them send it over to you.
Definitely. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure.
And then the second book we did that was released, I think last March, was, last summer, Guided Tarot for Teens. We readapted it and we took all the marriage talk and like sex talk and getting jobs and stuff out of it and made it more like, instead of thinking about like you and a partner or a husband or a wife or, whatever, like looking at it as like, here's how to deal with your friends. Here's how to deal with your parents when it's hard to communicate with them. Here's how to handle a crush. And, if you feel rejected. So we're trying to like speak to the teen experience, but also teach them those practical, here's how to use tarot as self-reflection when you feel like anxious and struggling.
Good.
Here's how to deal with school and having a teacher that's like on your case or something. Like, it's very cute. It was fun.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And then what's the new project?
Yeah, the new one.
So we took what we loved about Guided Tarot and we made it into Guided Astrology. Okay. And it's literally like a very gentle way to help walk you through how to read your own birth chart, what to look for, what the planets mean. And there's lots of self-reflection questions in it. Because I think astrology, again, it's not like, going to the newspaper, going to the back of Cosmo and like reading your horoscope. But just again, like, okay, I can understand myself based on my planets. And here's how I can present myself in an authentic way to the world. And also I can start to like understand the charts of other people so I can communicate better with them.
Yeah.
Again, I think tarot and astrology are very Jungian, more so than like woo-woo.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense when you're talking about shadow work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Carl Jung.
Yeah. Well, like I'm definitely like want to look more. No, but I mean, I really love the whole astrology aspect of it as well. Like, those are things I was like that were taboo, and that for so long, right? And now, like, I have this like excitement about learning more about these types of things. So I'm so glad that you were able to be on the podcast today and share that with us. And in this conversation, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but like there was no like fear in having this discussion. It was all like just so positive and exciting to learn more about it. And to continue to learn more about it. But if people want to connect with you, Stefanie, I know that you sent us that information, and we're definitely going to add that to our show notes. But how can people connect with you if they're wanting to learn more about what you do, more about tarot, more about astrology, perhaps even, get in touch with you for a tarot reading, astrology reading? I mean, how do they do that? How do they connect with you?
So most of my content is on Instagram, and my handle is at Moonvoid Tarot.
Okay.
Or moonvoidtarot.com is where you can book and schedule appointments. And also I have a course that I'm currently doing where it's a 6-week course. It's called the Tarot Manifestation Course. So it's using tarot alongside law of attraction practices to really help like overcome those limiting beliefs, shift your mindset, and, bring those big 2023 goals to you. Mm-hmm. So all of that is through my website or through Instagram, or, just shoot me an email. It's my name, Stefanie with an F at moonvoidtarot.com.
And with an IE also.
Yes. My mom wanted to be difficult.
Yeah, there you go.
But I appreciate you all like for being so open-minded. This was a really exciting conversation, and I'm so happy to meet you both. And I love what you're doing. I think it's really important work.
Oh, thank you. Well, this was a great conversation for me. I mean, not going into my story, but like I was up really, really late, and so woke up really, really tired. But this, like, I can feel the energy even through Zoom. Like, this was just an energetic, positive conversation, and it leaves me wanting to learn more, because I think when you learn more about what you're talking about, that we can learn more about ourselves, and that's what a gift, right? I mean, such a huge gift.
Good.
Yeah.
Your relationship with yourself, I think, is the greatest love story that you'll ever experience.
I love that.
And the more you're contributing to that love story, the stronger your partnerships with other people become.
Very true.
That's good. So
that's really good.
Maybe we should just end right there.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
See you down the road.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary. We hope you find who you are as you embark on your own journey.
For all of us here at the Desert Sanctuary, be who you are, be where you are, and be at peace.